They say all political careers end in failure, but ambushed by enemies, arrested by police, few have crashed out quite like Nicola Sturgeon. Having kept her counsel for over 2 years, tonight the former First Minister shared her secrets with Julie, from tattoos to trans rights, and the latter has yet again caused her trouble.
Anybody who commits the most heinous male crime against women probably forfeits the right to be, the gender of their choice.
They forfeit to be the gender of their choice.
That's
quite. I mean, this actually goes to the heart of the difficulty around this.
That probably was not the best phrase to use.
Having staked her leadership on advancing the rights of trans people in Scotland, now she says she wishes she'd paused gender self-identification as her critics had demanded.
And not only did she refuse to pause, she demonised us for raising legitimate questions about this legislation.
It is one of the most toxic debates in politics. Tonight, some trans people and campaigners also feel betrayed by Nicola Sturgeon's latest comments. It is not the only controversy covered in Julie's interview, as you'll see. Also, on News at 10.
We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
Trump talks trading Ukrainian real estate to get a ceasefire deal with Russia, as Zelensky warns Putin can't be trusted. The UN condemns the killing of 6 journalists in Gaza, accusing Israel of breaching international law. Eyes off the road. New tests could mean the over 70s lose their driving licence if they can't see well enough. And here's one she made earlier. The brains behind Blue Peter, editor Biddy Baxter, dies aged 92.
This is ITV News at 10 with Paul Brand.
Good evening. It is a little over 2 years since she exited the public stage to be taken almost immediately to a police station. Since then, Nicola Sturgeon has harboured some of the most closely guarded secrets in politics. As the longest-serving First Minister of Scotland, she seemed unstoppable, surviving everything from snap elections to a global pandemic. But in the end, it wasn't just a criminal investigation into party finances that cost her her career, but one of the most polarising issues of our time. In an exclusive interview with Julie, ahead of the release of her autobiography, Nicola Sturgeon has yet again waded into the controversy over trans rights. Rights she had wanted to advance. The issue erupted several times on her watch, including when a double rapist who claimed to identify as female was sent to a women's jail. Now Nicola Sturgeon says anyone who commits heinous male crimes against women forfeits their right to be the gender of their choice.
To go from the height of political power in Scotland to a desperate fight for her personal reputation has put Nicola Sturgeon to the toughest of her many tests. As she prepares to tell her story in her own words, she recalls the day in the midst of the investigation into SNP finances, her then husband was taken for questioning.
What was it like when you saw Peter being led away?
I don't really have a clear memory of that.
But the idea of him being taken out of your family home...
I genuinely don't know whether the fact that I don't have a clear image of that in my head is because I didn't witness it or that I have kind of somehow blocked it out. It wasn't until I got to my mum and dad's that I saw the pictures of my house looking like a murder scene. I had this sense of horror and upset and, the kind of shame of it all.
There was another clear punctuation point. You described Sunday, June the 11th, worst day of your life. You're arrested. You have to attend a police station. How was that?
Horrific. I think part of me just closed down.
Nicola Sturgeon's departure from office was also marked by one of the most toxic debates ever in Scottish politics around the controversial legislation she drove on gender recognition reform. She now wishes she'd handled it differently.
At the point I knew it was becoming or felt it becoming as polarised, I should have said, right, OK, let's pause. I fervently believe that the rights of women and the interests of trans people are not irreconcilable at all. I should have taken a step back.
So you're basically admitting that you should have just paused that legislation.
Yeah.
That you became unstuck over the questions about the transgender prisoner, the rapist, Isla Bryson. Why couldn't you answer that question?
I think I was caught up in the...
Will you answer it now, whether you believe Isla Bryson
Isla
was
Bryson identified as a woman. I think what I would say now is anybody who commits the most heinous male crime against women probably forfeits the right to be, the gender of their choice.
They forfeit to be the gender of their choice. That's quite... I mean, this actually goes to the heart of the difficulty around this.
That probably was not the best phrase to use. But
they forfeit their right to be the gender of their choice.
If you rape a woman, then I think you probably... The debate about whether they should be called a woman or not, probably...
Well, why don't you simply say then Isla Bryson is a biological male?
They are a biological male, but that's about whether it gets back into the self-ID thing. I should have been much more straightforward. I wasn't. We'd lost all sense of rationality in this debate. I'm partly responsible for that.
Nicola Sturgeon also reflects on her complicated feelings around her late friend and mentor turned political enemy, Alex Salmond. This on the moment she learned of his sudden death.
I still miss him in some way, the person that I used to know and the relationship we used to have. But I thought I had made my peace with it, that I'd got to a point where I felt nothing. And then I got a call to tell me that Alex Salmond had died. And I started crying on the phone, and I just was hit by this wave of grief. And it was complicated because obviously we weren't just no longer friends, we were political enemies. There was no prospect I was going to be able to go to his funeral or anything like that. Yeah, it was a kind of strange feeling.
But she now has her eyes firmly on the next chapter, away from the politics she's lived and breathed all of her adult life.
You've got a tattoo.
Midlife crisis alert.
Midlife crisis alert. Show us the tattoo, Nicola Sturgeon, and what that is.
So it's kind of an infinity symbol with an arrow. What it signifies to me is strength, resilience, and continuing to move forward, even when it feels impossible.
Julie there, talking to the former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. And already there's been angry reaction on several fronts to that interview, particularly on the topic of trans rights. The Scottish Tory leader said Ms Sturgeon had ignored all the warnings about gender self-identification, while some transgender people and campaigners feel bitterly let down by her change in stance.
Nicola Sturgeon was once the most powerful woman in Scotland and the most divisive. As she now publicly lifts the veil on her life, the political and the personal, the reaction to her reflections has already been characteristically polarising.
You're a man and I'm a woman. That's your opinion.
The battle over gender reform and trans rights became her undoing 2 years ago. In hindsight, Nicola Sturgeon now says she should have paused that legislation. But a pause is exactly what her critics like Joanna Cherry had been pleading for at the time, and their most vocal opponent was Nicola Sturgeon.
Not only did she refuse to pause, she demonised us for raising legitimate questions. She has now belatedly seen the light, big if. I wonder if she will accept that she owes an apology to the women she characterised as transphobes, misogynists, homophobes, racists, simply for questioning a policy which she now accepts should have been questioned.
Nicola Sturgeon still proudly sees herself as having been a resolute champion of women's and LGBT rights. But trans campaigners heard her comments today about the pause and trans people forfeiting rights with a degree of disappointment.
It just feels like this whole conversation has become really reactionary. And I appreciate that Nicola Sturgeon feels like maybe she needs to say something to placate the people who have now ended up sort of buying into this culture war. But at the end of the day, trans people are actually now in an even worse situation than we were a few years ago.
Nicola Sturgeon has lifted the lid on her volatile relationship with Alex Salmond. There is intrigue about what went on behind the scenes, but her former mentor is also no longer alive to defend himself. One of her closest friends in life after politics sees this as cathartic.
What's really important is that she does get her side of the story across, because there was a lot of things said, particularly during the Salmond trial, that she just couldn't and wouldn't talk about. And I do think it's important that we get that perspective.
Her dominance once seemed unshakable, but Nicola Sturgeon out of politics is showing us her vulnerability. A life racked by internal dilemmas, political divisions and personal dramas.
And Peter is in Edinburgh tonight, as you can see. And Peter, you say in that piece the interview shines a different light on Nicola Sturgeon, a more personal portrait of her. But do you think that will actually change any minds in Scotland about her, and beyond Scotland too?
Well, to answer that, Paul, I think I can point to Nicola Sturgeon's own words. She's spoken about how she's now considering moving to London. Now, the cynics are already saying that's so she can be closer to the TV studios for the next step in her career, but there is also because it brings anonymity. And she is a person who, everywhere she goes in Scotland, she is known. People have already formed deeply entrenched views of her. So I think if we apply that to this interview, there will be people who love Nicola Sturgeon, who respond very favourably to everything she said. And there are people who feel very strongly against Nicola Sturgeon, who will be almost hate-watching this interview and looking for more reasons to become angry about everything. But there is that kind of grey in between area. There are people who are watching this and thinking, well, look, we are seeing a different side to Nicola Sturgeon. She's speaking about things we haven't heard her talk about before, and she's speaking in a way that we haven't heard her speak before. It's not the rehearsed political lines anymore. She doesn't have a press officer sitting beside her, preparing her to within an inch of her life. But it's about the subject matters that she's focused on is also causing further division. When she speaks about Alex Salmond, for example, there are people who appreciate her candour, but there are those who are criticising the fact that he's no longer alive to defend himself. What we're seeing here is Nicola Sturgeon relaunching herself, in part trying to liberate herself from the conflicts of the past, and in part trying to settle unfinished business. I think that what's clear is that by her own acknowledgement, when the pages of her book, her career is defined by division and drama.
Indeed. OK, Peter, thank you very much indeed. And you can watch more of what the former First Minister of Scotland had to say to Julie in Nicola Sturgeon, the interview. You can watch it on ITVX or YouTube. Just search for ITV News Nicola Sturgeon. Now to the big event looming at the end of the week, the planned summit in Alaska on Friday between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. President Trump said today he would try to get some territory back for Ukraine, whatever the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky might think of that pledge. And don't forget, there are currently no plans for him to be president. Mr. Trump also said the summit would essentially be what he called a feel-out meeting. It'll be good, he said, before adding, but it might be bad.
He came to talk about security in the nation's capital.
Wow. I've been up here a lot. I've never seen a crowd like this.
But President Trump's press conference soon focused on a bigger picture.
You mentioned your upcoming meeting with President Putin.
Yeah. Friday's summit with President Putin, a meeting he characterised as an opening rather than a conclusion.
This is really a feel-out meeting, a little bit. And President Putin invited me to get involved. He wants to get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed.
Russia is continuing to slowly gain territory from Ukraine in the east at great human cost. But today, President Trump seemed to be framing any future peace treaty like he was negotiating a tricky real estate deal.
Because there'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody. For the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad.
Despite a press conference lasting more than an hour and a quarter, President Trump gave very little information about what concessions, if any, the Russians would be willing to make to secure a peace deal. And all the while, the Ukrainians say they have intelligence showing Russia is preparing for a new offensive. Tonight, President Zelensky was skeptical about Putin's intentions.
Немає жодної ознаки, що росіяни. There is no sign whatsoever that the Russians have received signals to prepare for a post-war situation. None so far. On the contrary, they are moving their troops and forces in such a way as to start new offensive operations.
President Trump, though, has dangled the prospect of direct talks between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine.
I'll be speaking to Zelensky. The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
A press conference in a critical week of his presidency, which seems to leave more questions than answers. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Well, the US president's apparent approach to trading real estate in Ukraine will only add to international anxiety surrounding Friday's summit. Germany invited President Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky, the head of NATO, and European leaders, including Sir Keir Starmer, to take part in discussions on Wednesday. To give some context, Downing Street said quite candidly today that Vladimir Putin should not be trusted as far as you could throw him. So, what might any Ukraine peace deal reached on Friday actually look like? Raggy is here with the options and possibilities. Raggy.
Thanks very much, Paul. Well, what we do know is that Trump and Putin are meeting in Alaska this week to discuss the future of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, any peace agreements will surely depend on what, if anything, both sides are willing to give up to end the conflict. Now, in recent months, Russia has made progress. It's been slow, it's been bloody, but they are also advancing. It's been estimated that Russia controls almost 20% of Ukrainian territory. But even if the conflict was frozen along the front lines right now, Ukrainian President Zelensky has already flatly said he would not gift land to Russia, saying Ukraine cannot accept a deal that hands over territory to Russia because of its constitution, a position backed by most European powers who won't want to see Russia rewarded for its aggression. But for Putin, it may prove difficult because Russia already claims ownership of the whole of 4 regions of Ukraine, much of which it actually doesn't control. So how would he explain surrendering claims to these 4 provinces? And we must not forget Trump's words today, saying he was going to try to get some territory back for Ukraine. So what are the challenges to Russia? Despite the slow gains it has made, it's come at a terrible price. Earlier this month, in a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump claimed that Russians have lost more than 112,000 troops since the beginning of this year alone. And he said that Ukraine had lost a mere 8,000 troops. And what about Ukraine's challenges? They signed the Minsk II agreement in 2015 with Russia, when Moscow had actually moved into Crimea, which was backed by Europe, but inevitably it didn't bring an end to the hostilities. So how does the US square this circle? Ukraine, with Europe supporting it, holding firm, whilst Trump has to consider what leverage he has over Putin, who has so far been unwilling to yield absolutely anything. Ukraine applied for NATO membership in September 2022. Both Trump and Putin have already ruled it out. But there is pressure also hanging over Trump as well. One of the key claims during his latest presidential campaign was that he would end the Ukraine conflict on day 1 after taking office. But so far, it's looking like he may well have to wait a lot longer before he has the necessary leverage over both sides to do that.
OK, Raggy, thank you. It could be a very seminal week. And so let's return to Dan. Now, in Washington, President Zelensky has been warning America, Dan, not to trust Vladimir Putin. But today it sort of felt, watching President Trump, like he was swinging back towards favouring the Russian president over the Ukrainian president again. I mean, do you think President Trump is listening to Kyiv?
I think this is a sort of classic case, Paul, of hope over expectation, really. I think he's going into this talking it up without any real detailed work having been done in the background. Normally these summits are worked on for weeks or months beforehand. This has all been put together in a matter of days, really. And so there are some really thorny issues that just haven't really been gone through in any detail. Raggy mentioned there the constitutional issue with Ukraine. It would be against their constitution to simply cede territory to Russia. But even if they did somehow overcome that, we haven't found out what would happen to the people that live in those areas that are currently occupied by Russia. Would they be allowed to return to Ukraine? What about all the missing children as well? And then what about any form of security guarantees? How can President Trump and the West and Europe guarantee that if a deal is done, that President Putin isn't going to come back in a few years' time and take another chunk out of Ukraine? So I think there is still an enormous gulf, really, between the red lines of the Ukrainians on the one hand and the desires of President Putin on the other.
OK, Dan, from Washington, thank you very much indeed. Tragically, there is already a long roll call of journalists, the UN estimates more than 200, who've lost their lives trying to bring us the truth about the war in Gaza. If that statistic is not chilling enough, it is even more disturbing that Israel confirmed today that 6 journalists were killed in a deliberate strike by its armed forces. They include 5 from the Qatar-based Al Jazeera network, who were killed when an Israeli airstrike hit their shelter outside Gaza City's biggest hospital complex. Israel says it was targeting one of those Al Jazeera journalists, Anas al-Sharif, because it claims he was a Hamas terrorist, a claim that is vehemently denied by his employers. The deaths have been met with widespread condemnation from around the world.
Israel murdered correspondent Anas al-Sharif and others in a drone attack in Gaza.
Across the Arab world and for many other people besides, Anas al-Sharif was the face of the Gaza war. He and his Al Jazeera colleagues were killed in an airstrike on their tent, which was pitched beside a hospital. Unlike the vast majority of the world's news organizations, Al Jazeera has correspondents operating freely on the ground. The network believes the Israelis assassinated the team to hide the truth about what's going on in Gaza.
And we understand and we believe the aim is to hide the truth, is to hide their crimes. They want to hide the crimes and they want to hide the genocide and not let the journalists to document it.
To back up their claims that Anas al-Sharif was in Hamas, the Israelis have posted 3 lists in which they allege his full name appears. A list of Hamas operatives in northern Gaza, a list of injured operatives, and a phone directory. The IDF's allegations have been strenuously denied by his employer. The Al Jazeera team are only the latest in a long line of journalists killed since the war began, their deaths bringing the total to 192.
That's more journalists killed since October the 7th, more killed worldwide in the preceding 3 years. So that gives you a sense of just how deadly this war is for journalists.
Last year, Mr. al-Sharif helped Reuters win a Pulitzer Prize for their Gaza coverage. He was a father as well. In a message to be posted in the event of his death, Anas al-Sharif said, "I never hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or misrepresentation." John Irvine, News at 10, Tel Aviv.
Here, Downing Street has said the Palestine Action Group is violent and has committed significant injury and criminal damage. Number 10 defended the decision to ban the organisation under counter-terror laws after hundreds of people were arrested over the weekend. It went on to say evidence and security assessments shared in closed court supported its position. Marks & Spencer today restarted its click and collect shopping service after a hiatus lasting almost 4 months. After a damaging cyber attack on the world-famous retailer during Easter weekend, its systems stopped working. Other parts of its operation also needed to be restored, such as contactless payments and online orders. Campaigners gave a guarded welcome today to government plans for an overhaul of road safety measures. The proposals include tougher drink-drive limits and mandatory eye tests for older drivers. Motoring organisations called the plans a step in the right direction, but say more is needed.
Two friends out on a day trip. Both suffered catastrophic injuries when a motorist ploughed into them as they tried to cross the road. The driver, who'd been diagnosed with an eye condition, ignored advice not to drive.
She died helping somebody across the road. That's testament to my mum as a person. She was very well loved and is very well missed. It's unjust, unnecessary, and had the law been in place, my mum would still be here.
Over 6 million over 70s hold a full UK driving licence, but the onus is on them to report any sight issues. But not for much longer should the government roll with plans for that age group to take eye tests every 3 years. If the tests have failed, they lose their licence.
And would you be willing to give up your driving licence because of a failed eye test?
Yes, because I don't want to be a danger on the road. I really don't.
If you failed one of your biannual eye tests, would you be happy to give up your licence?
Oh, I wouldn't be happy.
But would you do it?
Yeah. Everybody's driving, so test everybody.
It is part of the government's road safety strategy aimed at protecting both motorists and pedestrians.
We are not taking road safety seriously enough, and where particularly as we get older and the quality of our eye health deteriorates, that we're not keeping a regular check. So it's one of the things that the Transport Secretary is considering.
Also under review is lowering the drink-drive limit in England and Wales, bringing it in line with Scotland and the rest of Europe. Instead of blood tests, roadside saliva tests could be used to prosecute drug drivers, and there could be tougher penalties for uninsured motorists and those not wearing a seatbelt. But with those under 24 responsible for more accidents than the elderly, some are asking if the wrong age group is being targeted. Rachel Townsend, News at 10.
It was bad news for Eagles fans today after Crystal Palace lost its appeal against a motion from the Europa League. It means the FA Cup winners will now play in the European Conference League this coming season. Nottingham Forest are expected to take their place in the Europa League. Palace were demoted by UEFA in July for breaching multi-club ownership rules. And finally, long ago, children's television was dominated by Watch with Mother and shows like Crackerjack based on party games. Then along came Biddy Baxter. During her time as editor of the long-running BBC children's show Blue Peter, she turned all that on its head. Formidable enough to even make Director Generals quake, she did what no one had done before and gave children a voice on television. Biddy Baxter has now died at the age of 92.
The famous badge, pets on set and charity appeals were all part of one person's TV master plan.
This is Biddy Baxter. Turn face your public.
Not often seen on screen, Biddy Baxter's fingerprints were all over the success of Blue Peter, encouraging children to send in ideas, letters and pictures. The show at its peak pulled in 8 million viewers.
Biddy has been running up and down the stairs from the control room to the studio floor for 26 years.
In recognition of Biddy's work, she was given a special BAFTA, quick to credit those who made Blue Peter what it was.
The true stars of the programme are the Blue Peter badge winners, because one way of winning a badge is to send a letter with a good idea for the programme or a criticism. So there's the biggest and best focus group of all time out there, and this award, dear BAFTA, could not have been won without them.
Are you sure I deserve it?
Yeah, I'm absolutely positive you deserve it.
She left the show in 1988 and was awarded its highest honour, a gold Blue Peter badge. Baxter was invited to meet the late Queen when the programme celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2008. Those who presented the show say she was as fearsome as she was formidable.
You knew that all doors would open for the programme, for Blue Peter. She would say, don't worry about it, I'll sort it out. Nobody said no to Biddy Baxter. People ahead of her at the BBC did not say no, because she had that smile and she had that very nice but forceful way of saying, you will do this for me, won't you? She had very high expectations. If you didn't quite come up to those expectations, she did let you know about it.
Biddy Baxter is not only credited with getting Blue Peter into homes across the country, but helping to shape the future of television.
The TV pioneer, Biddy Baxter. And that's it for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.